The war between the Lebanese militia Hezbollah and Israel is over, at least for the time being. Israel and Hezbollah have agreed to a ceasefire that many see as extremely fragile. In fact, the Israeli government itself has been very clear, advising the displaced inhabitants of the 60 villages bordering Lebanon not to return to their homes. There must be a reason. Whatever the case, for now, the agreement is more or less being honored, but it's not clear for how long. But what exactly does this ceasefire consist of?
Well, you see, we're talking about a 13-point agreement in which the most important is the one that gives a 60-day deadline to end the presence of Hezbollah terrorists in southern Lebanon, a period of time during which Israeli forces will also have to withdraw completely from the area. For its part, the Lebanese government will have to guarantee Israel the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701.
This particular resolution states that since 2006, any armed presence of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon is prohibited. And as we told you in this video, it's something that has been constantly violated. The big question now is how long this kind of tense peace will last, because just a few days after the ceasefire, we've already seen news items like this.
Israel said it had targeted militants headed to a rocket facility, but neither Israel nor Hezbollah seemed keen to immediately return to full-scale fighting.
Israel has made it clear that it will continue to attack any terrorist it considers a threat, with or without a peace agreement, an agreement that Hezbollah desperately needed, and one that also suits Israel. Because let's not forget, the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah may also have many implications for Gaza and the Palestinians. Why? Because Hamas is still holding Israelis hostage in the Gaza Strip, and yet more than a year has passed since the fateful day of 7th of October 2023, when all of this kicked off. We're talking about at least 97 hostages held by Hamas and related groups, of whom about a third are believed to have already been killed. Well, now, given the ceasefire with Hezbollah, Israel will be able to take advantage of it, not only to regain energy, but also to turn its full attention once again to Gaza and Hamas. VisualPolitik community, the war is dragging on much longer than it should have, and the consequences no longer affect only the devastated Gaza, but the whole of Palestine, including, of course, the West Bank. In fact, in this enclave, the tension is growing day by day. Clashes between Israelis and Palestinians are becoming more frequent, the main trigger being the Jewish settlements inside the West Bank.
At least 4 Palestinians killed by Israeli forces in West Bank's Nablus. Israeli bus attacked in West Bank, at least 8 injured.
Violence is on the rise in what had been, until now, a relatively calm area of Palestine compared to the war against Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. In fact, and this is very important, many of the attacks against settlers living in Jewish settlements inside the West Bank have been claimed by Hamas itself, which is logically now trying to extend its playing field. So it appears the risk of the war spreading beyond Gaza is getting higher and higher. Never mind the agreement with Hezbollah or what is happening in Syria, things in Israel and Palestine are still not stable. And that's why we have to ask a crucial question, so that all this doesn't take us by surprise. What the hell is going on in the West Bank, in the other part of Palestine? Well, in this video, we're going to tell you all the details. We've said it many times, Netanyahu is a politician without whom the evolution of Israel in recent decades cannot be understood. The problem is that, over time, politics contaminates even the most meticulous of politicians. The political front line is really toxic. In fact, many of you know that the Prime Minister of Israel is involved in judicial problems, and that in order to regain power, he allied himself with extremist parties of Orthodox Jews, such as the religious Zionist Party. And once he was back in charge of the country, he pushed through a highly controversial judicial reform that guaranteed him far greater control of the judiciary, including a reform of the majorities needed to appoint judges. Well, the fact is that one of the most important figures in this coalition government between Netanyahu and the religious Zionists, and also the ultra-Orthodox, is this man you see on the screen, Bezalel Smotrich. This guy is the current finance minister, and the truth? The pearls he spouts every now and then don't bode well for the future of Israeli-Palestinian relations, at least not as long as Netanyahu depends on their political support. Check it out.
We created a separate civilian system. It will be easier to swallow in the international and legal context, so that they won't say that we are doing annexation here.
Smotrich is referring to plans he has for the West Bank. He's even gone so far as to say that 2025 will be the year of sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. In other words, this is the Minister of Finance, publicly advocating Israel's total annexation of the Palestinian territories under the control of the Palestinian National Authority. The objective? To avoid the creation of a Palestinian state at all all costs, something to which the religious Zionist party is radically opposed. Therefore, with the annexation, this possibility would end. The West Bank would become Israel again, although the Palestinians would never be citizens of Israel. And that's not only a problem due to the fact that annexation not only contravenes all agreements and the position of the international community, but it would also mean that leaving nearly 3 million people living in the West Bank in limbo. That and absolutely insane security costs for Israel. The point is that Smotrich has gone so far as to claim that annexation of the West Bank is something that the new Trump administration would support. And the truth? We don't know if Trump stands for that on the sly, but what is known is what he said to Netanyahu. Check it out.
Trump signals support in call with Netanyahu, do what you have to do.
This sort of carte blanche had fine print. Finish doing what they have to do before he takes office as president on 20th of January 2025. And not only that, Trump has also given Hamas a deadline to release all the hostages that are being held captive in Gaza. The deadline? Once again, his inauguration day.
Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th, 2025, the date that I proudly assume office as president of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East, and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity.
So what does all hell to pay actually mean? A US intervention in Gaza? Well, we don't know. We'll have to see.
In other words, the president-elect wants this conflict to end before taking office. It would be a significant political win, but to achieve that, an exit strategy is needed, a plan to end the war that Israel would find acceptable.
Well, here we have to look back almost 5 years, right to the end of the first Trump presidency.
In January 2020, Trump, along with Netanyahu, presented a peace plan for Israel and Palestine, a plan that would totally change the map of the area and which, of course, did not meet with the approval of the Palestinian authorities. But neither did it have the approval of the Yesha Council, which represents Jewish settlers in the West Bank.
The first, the Palestinians refused because it was tailor-made for Israel, a plan too favorable to the Hebrew state. And the second, the settlers refused, simply because they refused to recognize the existence of a Palestinian state. The fact is that with this plan, Israel was practically guaranteed strategic control over the possible Palestinian state, although, as you can see, it didn't seem at all easy to execute. Even less so now that the settlers themselves are in the government hand in hand with the religious Zionists. Nevertheless, within Trump's entourage, it seems that there are still those who believe in the plan. What's more, some are betting on reviving it and making it the centerpiece of his Israel-Palestine policy during his second presidency, something of a whatever-it-takes kind of plan.
Trump officials suggest 2020 Israeli-Palestinian peace plan will be back in play.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. Let's see. You've already mentioned the damn plan to me 80 times, but what exactly does it consist of? Could this plan be rescued and implemented with the current situation? What consequences could this entire story have over the next few months? Well, right now we're going to answer all these and more questions, so stay tuned.
The deal of the century.
VisualPolitik community, we're going to travel back in time. We're in early 2020. Donald Trump has just launched his deal of the century, which is supposed to be the ultimate solution to the never-ending Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In practice, this peace plan is a political victory for Israel. Why? Well, because the plan consolidates its control over the West Bank, while offering the Palestinians, well, not that much. The plan gives Israel sovereignty over 30% of the West Bank, including the strategic Jordan Valley and most of the settlements. For the Palestinians, the plan envisages the creation of a demilitarized state on a territory roughly comparable in size to what has traditionally been considered the West Bank and Gaza, provided, of course, that Hamas disarms and the Palestinian Authority stops making payments to the families of imprisoned terrorists. The idea is that this territorial jigsaw puzzle for the Palestinians will be linked by roads, tunnels, and bridges. We're talking about a plan whose infrastructure and economic development programs for Palestine would cost some $50 billion, a fortune that would have to be financed by some Arab states. Now, let's come back to the present. As you can see, it didn't seem very realistic. But of course, without these transport connections, the new state would be unviable. It would be a kind of Swiss cheese without territorial coherence. The country would be a collection of completely isolated enclaves. But that's not all. For example, what would happen with Jerusalem? Well, the whole world would have to recognize it as the capital of Israel. And yes, the Palestinians could have their capital in some suburb of Jerusalem, but always on the other side of the separation barrier.
As if that were not enough, with this plan, Israel also secured control of the border with Egypt in exchange for ceding a few small rafts of land in the middle of the desert to the Palestinians, which would be connected to Gaza by a road. In these new territories, Israel would help them create an industrial park and a new agricultural and residential area.
In short, a scattered hodgepodge, as well as a Palestinian state on paper, but one without any real sovereignty. A plan that promised the Palestinians a prosperous future, more or less, provided such complicated conditions as disarming Hamas, renouncing any previous territorial claims, and permanently submitting to an economic system supervised by Israel were met. Because the new state would not be entitled to even have an airport, and that's provided the promise of more than $50 billion in infrastructure was fulfilled, which, what can I say, that was never going to happen. But anyway, as you know, the situation has changed a lot since 2020, and now tensions between Israelis and Palestinians are at the worst they've been for a very long time. And with Trump about to return to power, the big question arises. If the new tenant of the Oval Office revives this plan in order to achieve peace, could it work? Well, I'll throw a spoiler at you. Not likely. The political reality in Israel makes reviving Trump's plan a real brain teaser. For starters, even the Israelis themselves might reject the plan they agreed to in 2020. Basically because, following the Hamas attack on 7th of October last year, the two-state idea has almost completely vanished. No one even conceives of it as a remote possibility anymore. What's more, since 2020, Israel has not exactly wasted time. It's expanding settlements at full speed. We're talking about almost 24 square kilometers captured and annexed in the West Bank in 2024 alone. To give you an idea, this is an area larger than what they had taken in the previous 20 years combined. It's an area roughly equivalent to 3,300 soccer fields or 7 New York Central Parks. And let me say it again, this is only in 2024. Not only that, they've also approved the construction of nearly 5,300 new housing units for Israelis in the West Bank. And here, I'd like to pause for a moment. We on VisualPolitik believe that Israel has every right to defend itself against its enemies and the terrorist groups that attack it from various sides. I think we've been quite clear that this is our position. We support Israel's right to defend itself, and we also recognize it as the only real democracy in the whole region in the Middle East, which is no small thing. But at the same time, we say this. We've also told you many times that we believe that the expansion and constant creation of new settlements in the West Bank is a major strategic mistake. It's a mistake that only perpetuates the conflict and distances us from any possible solution. Now, having said that, and going back to what we can expect from Trump's presidency for Palestine, there is one point that may be absolutely crucial to understanding what we can expect from his new administration. In a nutshell, Trumpism is surrounded by very, very pro-Israel profiles, starting with Jared Kushner, the husband of Trump's daughter, Ivanka. He is Jewish and previously served as an advisor to Trump during his first presidency, but he's far from the only one. You remember Marco Rubio, right? Well, his nomination as future Secretary of State already gives clues as to where things may be headed. Take a look.
I want them, Israel, to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals who did horrifying crimes.
It couldn't be clearer. Rubio has very clear ideas about Israel and Palestine. Jerusalem must annihilate Hamas terrorism at all costs. In fact, in the video you just saw, he was also asked if he would want a ceasefire between the two sides. His answer? A resounding no. Another profile that will greatly influence Trumpist policies towards Israel is Mike Huckabee. The former Arkansas governor is Trump's pick to be the new ambassador to Israel. And the truth? He has never minced words when it comes to supporting Netanyahu. That if the West Bank is Judea and Samaria, then it is Israel. That the two-state solution is unrealistic and makes no sense. In fact, Huckabee staged a controversy in 2018 when he laid a ceremonial brick in the Israeli settlement of Efrat in the West Bank. What's more, he even let slip that he might move his vacation home there. As you can see, this is a real boon for the most fervent defenders of Israeli expansionism in the West Bank. But okay, let's recap for a moment. What we've told you what Trump's 2020 peace plan consisted of. We told you that this plan could be rejected today even by the Israelis themselves after the October 7th attacks, and all that has happened since. And we've told you that the next Trump administration is going to be influenced by quite a few very, very pro-Israeli profiles. So, does this mean that Trump has no real intention of reviving the agreement? Well, with Trump, you always have to proceed with caution, because if anything characterizes him, it's his unpredictability stability. But some analysts point out that in reality, what he's looking for is something else: to put so much pressure on the Palestinian Authority that it has no choice but to accept this agreement, or another very similar one that is adapted to the current reality. In other words, one that is even more advantageous to Israel's interests. Even so, VisualPolitik community, in this, Trump may run into a huge problem. A problem that, I'm sure, many of you wouldn't expect. Pay close attention.
The Great Dilemma.
It takes two to tango, and for a possible agreement similar to the one Trump pushed for in 2020 to come to fruition, requires both Israelis and Palestinians to agree. In 2020, King Bibi welcomed the plan with open arms, but as we've already told you, these days the situation could be radically different. So much so, despite the plan being tailor-made for Israel, they themselves might flatly refuse to even consider it at this point. You see, beyond the problems that a Palestinian state would already entail, such as ensuring that terrorist groups do not take control, there is an additional problem. The Israelis don't even want to see a Palestinian state or anything resembling it anymore. At least not now, and maybe not for the next, 3, 4, 5 decades. Who can say? To begin with, because the Palestinians overwhelmingly support, or at least justify, the October 7th massacre. This is shown by an opinion survey conducted by the Faculty of Social Sciences at Tel Aviv University. 80% of all Palestinians justify the Hamas massacre that killed around 1,200 people and saw more than 254 more kidnapped. Not even the Palestinian National Authority itself went so far as to condemn that attack, even justifying it. Something that makes it almost impossible for the Israelis to be willing to stomach a Palestinian state. Because the problem of whether the two-state model is a good idea or not is no longer only political. We're talking about an irreconcilable fracture between the two societies. In fact, pay attention to this other graph. As you can see, support for the creation of a Palestinian state living side by side with the Israeli state has just kept falling among non-Arab Israelis since 2016. In fact, an all-time low was reached in July of this year. Only 21% of Israeli Jews support the idea. And the Palestinians? Well, since the Hamas attack, more Palestinians support the two-state idea, albeit slightly. The level of support has gone from 34% to 40%. Of course, for most Palestinians, the alternative is no Israel. And, of course, the question is, how on earth can you build a two-state solution with such a mess? Well, I'll tell you, you can't. Or at least not realistically. In fact, this is going to be Trump's big obstacle, and even Netanyahu himself is already rejecting it outright.
Netanyahu restates opposition to two-state solution despite pressure from Biden. The Israeli Prime Minister said that he had long opposed a Palestinian state because it would constitute an existential danger to Israel.
What's more, with social support in Israel at rock bottom, there's no political incentive to advocate the creation of a Palestinian state. And let's not forget, the current Netanyahu government is sustained by the religious Zionist party of Bezalel Smotrich and the Jewish power of Itamar Ben-Gvir, two parties that hate the idea of the very existence of Palestine, and that argue strongly for the expansion of settlements and even the annexation of the entire West Bank.
Two settlement leaders, Ben-Gvir called to annex West Bank after Trump victory.
VisualPolitik community, it comes back to what we were telling you before. Many things have changed since 2020, and the new Trump administration will have no choice but to adapt to this new reality and come up with some new ideas. Either that, or blindly support whatever Netanyahu wants to do. We shall see. The fact is that many analysts not only warn that Bibi would reject any agreement in this regard, but that he will continue to give carte blanche to the expansion of settlements in the West Bank. It seems the only way to normalize the situation in the West Bank would be for Trump to get fed up with the conflict and force Israel down that path, which doesn't look easy either. In any case, we already told you at the beginning of the video that Trump has demanded that Netanyahu end the operation in Gaza before he returns to the Oval Office. The problem is that if the tension continues to grow, even a major military clash within the West Bank would not be ruled out. That would be a terrible scenario, but it's no longer out of the question. The VisualPolitik community, only time will tell if the 2020 plan is back on the table and under what terms. Of course, all of us here at VisualPolitik will be keeping a close eye on anything Trump does regarding Israel and the Palestinian conflict. But until that becomes clearer, the turn is now yours. Do you think Trump will try to resurrect his peace plan? Will he force Netanyahu to end settlement expansion, pitting him against his own government partners? Leave us your thoughts below in the comments and we'll start a debate. And very important, if you liked this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to our channel, which is free, and activate the little bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thank you very much for watching. All the best. See you next time.